afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Bryan Art Gallery, and thank you for turning out, inclement weather aside. We have a wonderful artist with us today to speak about her work and exhibition that's currently on display. Her name is Bergstedt, and she's joining us from San Francisco, California this afternoon. And she's going to tell you all about her work, but I'd like to tell you a little bit about Marie. Marie has been a hard-working artist for a number of years, and I've gotten to know her through a series of exhibitions that we've been in together. For a long time, she was the Montalvo Art Center Development Director in California, where she helped to facilitate and raise funds for an arts residency in California. She has exhibited at the World of Threads Festival in Ontario, Canada. She's exhibited recently in the 17th International Open Women's Made Gallery in Chicago, Illinois. And she's been in the Tallahassee International at Florida State University. She was also the second place winner at Fantastic Fibers 2014 in Paducah, Kentucky, which is a big to do in the fiber arts world. So it was really nice to see her pick up that award as well. She has been featured in numerous publications dedicated to the arts and fiber arts especially. She's been in Fiber Arts Now, textile arts from around the world. She's also been in the anthology of contemporary textile and fiber art as a published artist, and has had work and interviews featured on artbusiness.com, which is a great source for working artists to turn to for information. So if you would put your hands together this afternoon and give Ms. Marie Bergstedt a warm coastal welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. The worst trouble you're going to have with me is if I ramble. So I'm putting my watch right here and trying not to do it. I just realized this. Okay. We're going to have, instead of just the beautiful screen that has an image on it, I have asked to have one that leaves me a little bit of possibility for enlarging or moving around if I want to show you something special. So I apologize for that, but it works better for me. I practiced on things that did not require that. For some reason, we're not coming on here. Okay. First, I want to just tell you some things about my background, because I consider myself in a way very up to date because I am like a lifetime selfie, and but it wasn't always that way. When I was little growing up, I wasn't allowed to tell about things, and so I was always very quiet. I didn't have a very good self-image, and I loved art, but it was very impractical for someone like me to study art. So even like in high school, my family was at the bottom of the bucket, and I didn't study art because it was not looked upon as an intelligent. You weren't intelligent if you took art. You know, you were just looking for an easy A or something. So I took advanced sciences, advanced math, everything like that. And my two best friends would never tell me anything bad, just pulled me aside and said, Marie, you know, you have to understand you'll probably never graduate from high school. And I couldn't understand what they were talking about. I never let it bother me. I thought, why did they say that? Probably their parents told them that, because nobody in my family ever had graduated from high school. And then they'd say, and of course you don't have any money for college, so you're not going to go to college. And they were really trying to be nice to me, but I couldn't imagine where it was coming from. So of course I did all the things to try to show them I was smart enough, and then I won a big scholarship that paid for everything plus extra money to go to college. So that worked out well, but when I was in college then, I took a few more of the math and science classes, but I was very practical, and I didn't know too much about what you did to get money. So then I was an elementary education major, which was good for me because they required one studio art class when you were in elementary education. My last semester, senior year, that's when I took my first studio art class. And the last week of my senior year, the teacher came up to me and she put her hand on my shoulder and she said, my dear, you have missed your calling. And that was the most wonderful thing anybody ever said to me. She said, no matter what you do, I know you have to go out and you have to work and everything like that, but I want you to think about this. Always take workshops, always go to school, meet artists, do everything, because that is what you are, and that's where you should go. And so I always did that. I started working. I always took college classes. I always took workshops. I kept on going. I had a few years in the early 80s where I didn't have to work, and I really pursued art then and went to school full time. But I really had to pay for a life in between. So on I went. But I'll tell you about, in that time along the ways that I was studying art all the time, what happened was I ran into a class where they had a requirement that you had to do a self-portrait. And I had a terrible self-image. I could not do a self-portrait. You're supposed to look in the mirror, and do yourself. All the other students did it. They're going on to other things. The teacher would always say no when I turned mine in, because I would always be a dog or a beast or something, but I was never a person. So I didn't want to spend my whole life doing that. So I finally said, all right, I'm going to be a person. I'm going to look in the mirror. I'm going to do something about myself. It's going to be a human being, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my hair up in curlers. I'm going to put a mask, a facial mask on that dries up to pull out dirt out of your pores, and I'm going to go like that and have wrinkles. And I'm going to put an array of makeup all around, and he's going to say it's okay. And he did. Finally, I was able to get the pass because I was a human being, but it still says something about my self-image. Well, right after that, I went on and to another school. My husband's job changed. We moved from one state to another. And the best, then I was going to school full time. And the best department in that university was photography and art. And so I said, well, then I'm going to have to go into photography. So I started looking at photographs. At first, I looked at all the happy ones that I had in my collection, and those were fine. But then my sister had occasion to clean out some negatives from the attic of a house where my mother had once lived. And she said, no, you're doing photography now. You can print all these negatives and we'll see what's there. And those told the real story of my life, that I never remembered seeing any of those photographs before. And they had an awful lot of them with me looking like this or this. And those were the stories that I was never allowed to tell. And so I rejected the happy things, and that was what I was thinking about. But I was supposed to be taking photographs, not just looking at old ones. So I took my niece, and I went out with my niece and told her stories about, she lived in Michigan, by the way. I had to travel to get to my niece. We went out and talked about what I did when I was young, and she just took it on in the most wonderful way, and so she did things that I did. This happens to be one of the schools. Schools were my favorite things, the one place that I felt like I was successful, and that there were a few people there that liked me, teachers. They were always really nice to me. But what I realized was, in a way, I was thinking, all those old pictures, I was so afraid and I was trying to get away. This happens to be a picture where my mother is holding me up on a tall fence with one hand and her other hand is out here, and my image of me was like, of course I was not safe, but I felt that way in everything. So I went on with my niece a little bit, and I found that I was always taking her places where we could introduce some kind of element of danger, because I was still feeling in danger. But I had some good things, and schools were part of them. So I got permission to go in old, even closed school buildings and take a lot of photographs. That's me back at the lockers. A selfie for sure. It's the camera's on the tripod. And the girls' bathroom was very meaningful to me. It's there in the foreground. It says girls, and girls have been nicer to me. But then I have very recurring things that I don't realize until I look back. I now think, oh, I want to do this again. But here's a bride, but that's me. That's not my house. I borrowed a friend's house, and I put on my wedding gown, and I've got the dust mop, and I found as I looked back for this that, oh, I must have been thinking about brides carrying funny things way back then, and I'm obviously still doing it without thinking about it. I also noticed that I thought about hair a lot. This is my foster mother with my niece at a little older age. And Another thing that recurs is curlers. They still mean a lot to me, and I find that I've used curlers a lot in my work. I started photographing my foster parents, and I ended up, this is my foster mother, probably in her 80s. I photographed her for 30 years, and she and my foster father became so comfortable with me around, always photographing. It was always when I was visiting them. I never lived near them again. I loved her arms and her hands, and they came up, one of the most recent things I did are her hands over there where it says no. And and here she's also the telephone person. This was probably when she was in her 80s. And one of the things I noticed over time is how much a telephone meant to her. When she died in 2008, she was more than 100. And I thought back to my past, how when we were living on a farm, she had 10 foster children sometimes at a time, and we were kind of isolated. She worked so hard. I remember doing the bread, kneading the bread for all of us like this in great big pans. Anyway, the telephone was her line to strength. And once a week, she called her mother, who lived in California. She lived in Michigan. And she got her strength to go on with a really, really hard life. And I started getting on this thing about thinking about people and their hard lives and things that happen to them and how you overcome it. I worked very long hours in fund development, not just at Montalvo, but 5 different places, mostly schools. And I saved my money because I really wanted to be an artist. I didn't like all this part-time stuff that I was able to do little hours here and there. So I finally saved enough money that I thought I can quit work, I can be an artist, and I'm not so old that everybody will just think I'm a hobbyist retired person. But the first thing that happened, maybe 2 months after I left my full-time job, was the recurrence of what I call it a back attack, because in 1993 I had been involved, I was a passenger in a car accident where the car was totaled, and I had a really serious spinal injury then that took me a couple years to get over, but I was able to keep plugging along. Well, right after I finally was into my art career, I had a relapse, and it was really bad. I couldn't walk. The doctors told me that I could possibly have a 58-50 chance of recovery without surgery, but the surgery that they wanted to do was really serious, and I wouldn't even be able to move. I would be in something for 6 months, and I just didn't want to do that. So I decided I'll take the 50% chance to work on it, because I've always been working on things. And so this was my first fiber sculpture piece that I made. It had to be about my spine, and I thought of it as like a bomb that the doctors are telling me this may not work and you may never be able to walk and so on, but I don't know when it's going to hit or collapse, but I'm working on it. So I was going around using a walker, not the same way people you see using the balance, but they made me use it so that as much of my weight as possible was on my arms. So I had to kind of swing my body, and then I had these springy shoes. But I got better. But I was on that health scene. I had to wear a back brace. I did it in purple and red, which a teacher that I had then hated, and she couldn't understand. But I don't know if you've ever seen those people with the Purple Hat Society. The women wear purple and the big red hats, and they're all over a certain age, and so I called this one Woman of a Certain Age. And I put automobile alignment tools in the back of it, and that was especially disliked by the teacher. Not everybody likes things. Then my best friend from junior high had a heart attack and died. This is all within a few months. Then my best friend in San Francisco got breast cancer, and she'd waited a little bit too long and had to have a breast removed. And when I started working on this project, I thought of every friend I ever knew who had breast cancer, and I had 6, so I called it 6 Friends. But by the time I was exhibiting it, I had to call it 10 Friends. That was a very fast time when many people got breast cancer. Then this is about CPAP machine for sleep apnea. Everybody talks about it as storing and ugly and everything, so I was trying to make it to be a beautiful affliction that a great many people have, so I made CPAP pretty. Then came another friend who had breast cancer, and it was her third reoccurrence in 17 years. And her greatest fear that she really didn't like was she's going to have to lose her hair again. And so I did this one for her called Rapunzel. And this is not a wig. This is all hand tied. I bought about 12 hanks. It's artificial hair, but they are, each thing is long like this. And then I made this very long piece, and it was very good for her because I put the story with it when I exhibited it. I told everybody the story that Rapunzel, if you don't know the fairy tale, she loved her hair, and she had this wonderful handsome prince who always climbed up to the tower to visit her and everything. And then the wicked old stepmother cut off all her hair, and of course, and also turned her out to the brambles and so on. But the hair regrew, and the prince came back, and she had a wonderful life. And I was trying to do this sense of renewal for my friend, but actually she did die. So then I thought, I got to get on some more positive things, and I started thinking about friends. In those days, it was a few years ago, it was raining in San Francisco a lot, in big storms. We have had hardly any rain for 4 years. It's really bad now. However, I kept finding all these smashed umbrellas. And by that time, I was doing enough work that people were starting to send me things. And there were two wonderful friends who had been my friends forever who sent me boxes in the mail of old linens and things that they just thought, Marie will do something with this. So I did. And I thought this was all about them, how we were these friends who went through so many trials together, but then we were really solid at the core because the center of the umbrella was still really strong. And a very embarrassing thing happened. It was the first time that I had done a piece that I didn't really know why I was doing it. And right in the middle of a critique, I just burst out crying, fell apart, because I realized that this was about friends who were solid to the core no matter what they go through, but that my best friend at that time in San Francisco didn't want to be my friend anymore because after my back problems, I was sort of getting towards the end, but I had always hiked and biked and everything with her all the time. And I couldn't do it as well anymore. So she decided she needed somebody who was younger and more full of life. Those were her words. And I was so completely crushed that this was about two friends that were still my friends back from high school, and I didn't understand. And you can tell now, even I didn't understand a friend who could decide you weren't good enough because you were working through a physical ailment. Okay, and then here's another one that I did. I didn't know why I was doing it. I have to look at my watch. I did this one. Just because I liked the looks of it, I thought of it as an old woman who's getting on in years. And I had a teacher who was doing a special graduate thing for 5 students. And she was pulling in people to help us do work that she thought was at graduate level. And we were writing. We were writing about why we do our work. And in the middle of that writing, I broke down because I realized this was a grandmother that I had only known for 4 years. I have lots of references to birth mother, stepmother, foster mother, etc. Well, this was my adopted father's. One father adopted me. His mother, I only knew her for 4 years, but she was the kindest, most wonderful person I had ever known. And unfortunately, she died when I was 8, and I didn't have a lot of time with her, but I've never forgotten her, and I realized this was her. And then another friend sent me a box of a torn up kind of top of a quilt. And I made this dancing thing I didn't know why. And later I realized that I loved to dance, but I never danced in high school. And so this was me dancing. And I didn't realize it until after I made it. So now I'd spent enough time in art that it was wonderful. So there were some people noticing me. So there was a curator who was curating for World Bicycle Relief. They were doing a fundraiser to send both bicycles and training for people to repair bicycles and so on to Zambia. And he had heard about me. He had 735, I believe, I know it's in the 700s, recommendations for people they thought would be good for this project. And he had to choose 50. And he ended up only choosing 40 people, but I was one of them. And the reason, not only being chosen to do a piece for this World Bicycle Relief was very important to me, but also that when they put them up to make money, there were only 2 of them that sold right away, and mine was one of those that sold immediately. And so I felt like that was a really important thing in my art career. Then I really wanted to do something happy, so I tried to think of the happiest thing that ever happened to me in my life. And it was when I lived with my birth mother for a little while, and I knew that there was very little money, and somehow at Christmas time, I got my favorite present of my life, and it was a toy typewriter. This is not a real typewriter that I got, but it was red, and you could go plunk, 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 and get some things out, so I had to make a typewriter. And I was so fortunate because I went to a typewriter repair store and I asked them if they had any leftover parts. They said, oh, we use every part, we never have leftover parts. And a week later they called me and they said, oh, they'd give me a whole typewriter and I could tear it apart for myself, which was very hard because I didn't want, that's not a typewriter under there. I built the typewriter, but taking keys and things, typewriters are not built to be taken apart. It was a very difficult physically. So that's kind of what it looks like in the back. Then back to the photographs again. One of them that was very meaningful to me is my sister. This is my sister Vicki piece. She was precious and pure and wonderful, and everything was always positive about her in life. And I wasn't. And so there was a photograph that it showed it just how it was supposed to be of the baby. And so there was Sister Vicki, and one of those negatives, the old cameras, they weren't single lens reflex or anything, and you never saw really what you were going to get. So this was supposed to be a picture of the baby, but then over at the edge of that negative, there was me, and it cut me right down half. And I felt like that was me. I was the half-sister. I was supposed to be pure, but I was tainted. And so I did the Sister Vicki and Marie, and I'm the and Marie. Then I went back again to making myself as an animal, but this was meant to be a positive one. A lot of those pictures had me standing in the middle of a field of cows, and I really did feel like a cow. So I liked doing this one. In fact, it's in the kitchen of one of my friends. And this is my adopted father, the one that adopted me. And to me, I did things of him, and I'll probably do more. I think he was 18 when he went into World War II, and he never got over 18. He was very immature, but he was also a NASCAR driver, and his number was 18, and everything he did was 18. It was like he became 18 forever in every way, and that's how I think of him. Okay, I wanted to show you the one thing, the only time I ever did one an object that's kind of just like I saw in a photograph is that one, and it's Z over there in the water. She is that grandma that I knew for 4 years, and I don't know how I inherited all these books and everything of photographs, but that family, I was not a close member of that family, but they gave me a lot of things, and I saw her. All these pictures, excuse me, are like 2 by 3 inches. I've measured them. And she is this figure in the back. She's about as big as my little fingernail. I don't even know how I noticed her. And then I looked for lots of pictures to see what she was wearing so I'd know it was really her. So she obviously keeps standing out to me because this is fairly recent. Then I discovered I had a brother who called me on the telephone. He didn't say who it was. I hadn't heard from him for 35 years. And he just left this message, call me. And he didn't leave a phone number, name, anything, but I knew it had to be him. So I started searching everywhere that I could try to find who, I think Mikey has called me, and I've got to find him. And that's Mikey over there on the green. Mikey had been for 11 years before that on the streets in Key West, Florida as a homeless person. And he had a telephone that he could borrow sometimes, and that's how he happened to call me. And I couldn't really afford to go to Florida, where he lived in Key West, and stay. It's very expensive. And so I found a residency there, and I said, you know, I have a brother who's on the streets there. I want to find him. I want to work with him. Could I do a project where my art is about him, but also where I'm doing some social things that you help me make some connections, perhaps help him. Right before I went, and that's what I did when I was at the residency in Key West. And right before I went, I had a head picture of Mikey when he was little, and this is totally from my imagination. It's not from any photograph that suggested it, but I just pictured Mikey and I were the two like this when we were little, and who had a lot of problems. And I pictured him breaking loose and being Mikey as a kid. And so I showed him a picture of this when I got to Florida. And he said, oh, I know that one. He says, I've got on the church clothes, and I've come home, you know, and I'm just acting out. And I don't ever remember him acting out when he was little, but he sure does now. Anyway, he is one of the people who liked that the most. A lot of people didn't like it, but it meant a lot to me because he recognized it right away and he understood what I was trying to do. Then I had a brother named Mark, and this is about Mark. Mike and Mark both, I took care of mostly when I was a teenager. I was a cheerleader. Mike was the mascot, so I could take him to games with me because I needed to take care of him. Mark, I took everywhere with me, even when he was a baby, and people who didn't know me thought it must be my baby because I was a teenager, but they were actually my brothers. And then, this is the last one, the history stuff. I thought you might want to see my inspiration for the bride that's over there. This is her, and this is my grandniece who had a wedding a couple of years ago, and she had so many tattoos and piercings that the officiant, well, I don't know if it was a minister or what it was, but when he was doing the vows, he said, well, I was going to talk about marriage, but I can see that you're very used to pain, so you're going to be a great wife. And actually, I think she is. But I thought it would be nice if you could see the tattoos that she really had. And then this one is another way that I repeat myself. Just before I shipped the things here, packing boxes can be difficult for a big thing, and I was just so worn out, and I had all these boxes all around, and I thought, I think I'll take a picture. I'll put the camera on the stand and take a picture of me with all these boxes. But I had help getting the boxes out of the house before I even had a chance. And so when I was looking at things for a background for this, I saw this. And this is when I was moving from Ohio to San Francisco long ago. And on the walls you see that Oscar the Grouch felt the same way as I did. And over here we have Big Bird. And over here peeking is Cookie Monster. Because at that time my daughter was just a little kid and I had painted the walls in the basement for her. And all this stuff over here is all art packed up, and you know, there's an easel, and there's that mop I used as the bride, and so that's the end of the history part. The next part that I want to do is about just the images here. I wanted to give you a chance to ask any questions you have about them, and I can put one up if it's hard for people to see and it's around the back of them. So I wanted to ask if anyone has any questions about these works.
Tell us a little bit.
Can you talk a little bit about your drawing in thread? I'm guessing that's done
The man
on
over
the
here?
sewing machine.
I never use a sewing machine.
You don't, that's all hand stitched?
No, it's all hand stitched. The one exception on the sewing machine is behind you here with I call it the deal, this one. I used a sewing machine to stitch to make these ribs in all of the folds, but otherwise everything I do is by hand.
So do you draw out a pattern, or are you drawing with the thread just intuitively?
Okay, with those, I had a basic look, and I did a drawing. What they're made with is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Solvay, which is kind of a dissolvable glue that makes its sheets, and a lot of people use it in sewing projects because after you sew on it, you can put it in the water and it dissolves and you just have the stitching. Well, in that case, I had a piece of Pellon, which is a non-woven fabric. I wanted to be able to pull out the ends and not cut just a straight line around them. I wanted them to be fuzzy around them. So that's a good thing for that. I basted big stitches on the top, that solvy thing, because it made it a little stronger to do the embroidery, because I didn't want it to tear apart while I was working on it. So then I did a basic drawing. Just, a few lines. And then I just went in with the thread and did it what it felt like to me.
So was the drawing on the Pellon or?
No, I drew it on the solvy so it would go away. I drew it on the solvy. Solvy is a sheet of, it looks like plastic, but it dissolves in water. And it was basted onto the Pellon. And so I had this 2-layered thing, but it was strong.
Washed so that would dissolve.
Yes, yeah. So after I did all the embroidery, then I put it in to dissolve, and then all that gluey stuff goes away, and all I had left was the threads, and the Pellon was pretty squishy at that point. Then I used hardener on it, as in bookmaking, adhesives, 2 kinds of adhesives that make a very good stiffener, and it probably has about 5 coats of stiffener after that to make it have body. Anything else? Yes.
All those over there come from photographs, because I know the one of the person looking down, and I just didn't know the other one.
Okay. Yes, they come from photograph ideas. In many cases, they're changed, because if we have time to do the example, I brought an example of how I make a photograph work for me. But the first one is, for instance, that's me. And it's I decided to do a beach scene because there's so many photographs of me as a child were at the beach. I lived in Michigan, there are lakes everywhere. We went to Lake Michigan, we went to all the smaller lakes. But they all have a story. They're not really about the lake or something, they're about what went on at the lake. And so all of those are different stories, different times. In my case, I was sitting on a pier and there was a lot going on that was very hard for me. And so I made it into like a floating raft, and I look actually happier than I did in the photograph. But it was based on the fact that I was sitting on the pier and some things are going on. If there's a particular one, there's some of those that I can tell you the background story of that is very meaningful to me. There are other people. The blue one, that's the second one, has I think an important story to me. If you want to hear it. Okay, that one's called Come Freddy, which is kind of an odd name for something, but here's the reason. That was a friend of my mother's. Her name is Cornelia. She was always very sad, and she had a very good reason. She had a son named Freddy, and he had cancer, and in those days, there was very little they could do about a child with cancer. He had a beautiful, I'm not thinking of the name of the wheelchair. It is much prettier than the ones we have now, but he was, she always wanted him to be able to do what everybody else could do. And every time I see anything of her, it's almost like she's pleading, oh, come, Freddie, I wish you could be with us. And she still tried to have a normal life and make Freddie as much a part of it as she could, but Freddie died, of course.
You may have already addressed this because I came in late, so I apologize if you already answered this.
No, go ahead.
Have you always sewn? I mean, has that been a part of your
no,
life?
I didn't address it. And I first sewed with a machine when I was 4, and we had a treadle at the farm where I grew up, and I couldn't reach the treadle because I was too little, but there were some teenagers who were there also, and they would make the treadle go so I could sew. And then when I was 8, my foster mother got me a job making doilies for a lot of people like doilies on their couches in those days. And so I learned to crochet, and I think I made more money doing that than I do from art because it costs so much money to do art. So I made money when I was 8 doing doilies. And knitting is my favorite thing, but I don't use it very much. I use very plain knitting in these. Yeah, I did handwork all my life. Anybody else?
A lot of people have been curious about where you get your materials from, and you've talked a little bit about people giving you materials. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay. I really do get a lot of them that people, once I started working on art, because I had those wonderful friends from high school, they started sending me things, and so I get it that way. And then when I started doing things, I would see people, Jim was talking yesterday about how friendly people are in the textile art world. Well, somebody would see me doing I did something and say, oh, I have a whole supply of that. I'll send it to you, and a box will arrive full of antique doilies or something. So I get a lot by surprise that way. The buttons I get primarily, most of these buttons have come from a place called Scrap. It's in San Francisco that specializes in scrap fiber related things. They have yarns and strings and lots of fabric and buttons. They have a few other things, but it's primarily a fiber kind of scrap. And I do sometimes order online, but I try to avoid the new. Buttons cost a lot of money, even when you're buying them in bulk, but at Scrap they don't. So, and they don't if somebody arrives at your door with a box and said, oh, my grandma had a lot of buttons. And I do, people were asking earlier, how many buttons do you think you have? I have no idea, but I have a son-in-law who, in his spare time, measures out a certain thing and counts the buttons and say, do you know how many buttons are in this? So I know I use a lot. Some of these have a couple thousand at least just on one piece. And I have jars of buttons, and they have shelves, and they're deep. And yeah, I have a lot of buttons. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about the time investment in every piece?
I need to hear better.
Could you talk a little bit about the time investment in the pieces, like how long?
Oh, the time investment, a lot. It's because I do everything by hand, it takes a lot of time. And also just being an artist, the work of the business side of it, the writing, the getting shows and so on, that takes a lot of time. So you have to count the fact that I do that, but I work a lot. And the average button person, I would say 2 months is an average on a button person. Depending, if it's a real little one, like the green one down there is a little bit of shorter time. So 2 months actually is the average a lot of things. The telephones are more like 1 month, except for the big old one, which is a 1907 model. That one took longer, but the smaller ones didn't take so long. The bride, I just kind of figured she'd take me 3 months, and she did. And that was because I was trying a lot of new methods and things too, that I always try to put a little bit of something new, and otherwise it's just making something by rote. So, does that mean a question? Yes.
What's up with the phones?
What's up with them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The woman that's in there is my foster mother, who always had her hand like this. She died in 2008, and she was more than 100. And as I look back, I wanted to do something to memorialize her. And the thing that I thought of most was the telephone was so important to her, because she was frequently either isolated living on a farm, or later in life she didn't live so far away, but she still lived by herself. She still lived by herself when she was more than 100. So the phone was her connection to strength to go on, to be healthy, to have friends. That was her telephone. So I picked models. Like the first one, the old one, is 1907. That's when she was born. And she used a phone like that for many years. And the interesting thing, I moved into my house in San Francisco in 1979, and there was a phone like that still on the wall. And that house was not that old, so that model was used a long time. And I just picked models from various times in her life. One of them is called Charleston Queen. My foster mother was one great Charleston dancer, and she could still do it really well in her 80s. So they were kind of standout things from parts of her life. But that's all about her. Anyone else? Yes. This one? Well, this one is kind of a recent discovery. This is a letter that was written to me by my great-grandmother. When I was little and a lot of bad things were going on, and I was never allowed to tell anybody about the bad things. But so I figured that not everybody knew, because it certainly wasn't anybody helping me out. This is a great-grandmother who lived at maybe 50 miles away, and I saw her occasionally, and I adored her. But I didn't know she knew that a lot of bad stuff was going on, because it was hidden. And then she wrote me this letter when I was getting married, because I'd written to her and said, do you have some addresses of people that we should invite to the wedding? And so I was probably so wrapped up in the wedding thing that I didn't even notice that she said, she had been talking about my mother for a while, and then she said, so if there are some things not so pleasant, I know you will be sensible enough to put them in the past. She's talking to me about knowing that there were really bad things going on, and she knew that now I was going to get married and I was going to go forward and just forgive anything of the past and just be positive. And I just found that letter within the last 3 years, and I read it and I thought, she knew. And I found a couple other letters too with people who knew, but when I was little, nobody did anything. So that meant a lot to me to realize, hey, we do better even by law now than people did then. We have to reveal things a little bit more now. Anybody else? Yes.
Can you tell me about
This one.
you had to talk about this?
Okay, these two go together, and they're hard to see, so there's the dog and the trike. This is an example of something I did, and I didn't know why I was doing it. It was just I found the trike on the street in San Francisco. It didn't have any back wheels or seat. That I made all that part, but it had the front part. And I knew that I loved bicycles and tricycles, and I still do. And I thought of myself as about 3 or 2, something like that, when my mother would always dress me up in really fancy dresses and tell me I had to look wonderful and for a picture. But I never felt wonderful, but I did feel wonderful when I was riding my tricycle. And so the tricycle was my power as a small child. But I had no real power, and that's why I don't have a head. But I did have a lot of power in my legs and my arms. And the dog, I had a dog that I could tell anything. I never had to be quiet. That dog could hear anything, and it wouldn't tell. And so that's that. And then after it's all made, it's been showing around and everything, I looked in that old box of little photographs. So I must have seen it sometime, but I didn't remember. There was a photograph exactly of me all dressed up by the tricycle and the dog. And so it was someplace back there in my memory when I was doing a piece. Oh, welcome. Anybody? Let's see. If you want to, it takes about 10 minutes or so to show a process of making an example, if you like. Do I see many likes? We could have a pause too, and people could leave if they didn't want to see it. But are there some people interested?
What is the story behind those three?
Excuse me?
What's the story behind those three?
Oh, the 3 men? They belong with the wedding, but that's a wedding party over there. That's Mikey, who my sister brought up for the wedding. He's the one dressed up with the cigarette and 4 layers of clothes on in September. The other one's my sister, and these, I felt like at that wedding, the men were not very significant, the women were very powerful. And so, except for Mikey, who took the crowd away. Everybody was taking Mikey's picture because he looked so funny. But other men were in the background. So I wanted to do them on not such a showy type style, but there were some really significant men there. And the first one is one who, I had a whole day there, they did makeup for the women in their hair, and they did this and that, and all day long they're doing stuff, and then they have the photographs in the park, and then they have the wedding, and then the reception, and so on. Well, I didn't have anything to do, so I took photographs, and I didn't think I'd ever use them for my art. I was just doing it, something to do. And that first man didn't think I had taken his photograph. And I had, but I didn't want to go back and try to figure it out. Which is very big. And before I came here, I thought, well, is he the size of Jim? But he's much bigger than Jim, now that I see exactly how big Jim is. Anyway, he was really angry, and he said, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Why aren't you taking my photograph?" And I felt very threatened because he'd been drinking a lot, and he's huge. And that's my impression of him, like, take my photograph. So then the one in the middle is another character, and it's my impression of him. He's a person who's silly all the time. He never takes anything seriously at all. And he also has assistance from drugs. And then the one on the right is the grandfather of the bride. And his wife was having a fabulous day. And this is him just as the bride was walking down the aisle, and everybody's excited, and he is very concerned looking. And I think it was because my sister took care of my brother Mike for a while, and she thought she could help him, kept him in the house. And he and my sister were just about to have a divorce because you can't take care of my brother Mike. It's too hard. And he was causing so many problems for them. And I think he was thinking about his own marriage. I don't know. But I took a picture of him, and that's not exactly what it was like, but I just noticed my sister's all excited, and he's like really concerned. So they were the background men at the wedding.
What are some of the connections? The title of the exhibit is Amendments.
Okay.
And we think about the connections between the act of sewing and the various types of techniques that you display here. How does that relate to your memories?
Okay, and I meant to say that at the beginning, just forgot. Amendments are a kind of thing that improves things. There are amendments to things that are written, and it's trying to make things better than they were to begin with. And mending, it kind of makes a garment better too. So I do a lot of textiles, but I felt like all of my work is about people. It's all about stories, and most of them are not happy stories. But by doing it and working through my hands and so on, they become a positive story for me. And people who don't know what the story is behind often think they're really fun and funny, and I love that. Or they have their own story about it, because they don't have to be my sad story anymore. They can be something lovely. And back there, the one that I showed you before of, I call the deal. Of all these things, that has the most difficult stories for me. But it's the one that people laugh about most, and that's great for me, because they just think, this someone playing the accordion and it's falling apart and all this. I really like that. And I get sometimes notices from curators who say, I'm invited in a while to speak at a group, and the person said, "I love your work, it's so funny. I just laugh and laugh and laugh." I like that. She doesn't know that everything is based on a sad story, because through making it, it's been amended. It's a good story, and I feel good, and it's been mended. Anybody else? Or is that enough, Jim, that you wanted?
Well, could you show us a short version of how some of them are made?
Yeah, this is I've told you some of the things about this already, so it makes it a little easier to go fast. This one is from the wedding. I thought it was a more all-round one. It's Victoria Red, the woman with the red shoes. That's my sister. I wanted to tell you about working with a photograph. This kind of looks like it's a photograph of her, only it isn't. I thought of that day, the wind was blowing, the women all had their hair done, and they all had bad hair days because it was really windy. They all looked awful. after having their hair done. The women were powerful and looked like they were marching forth. It looked like it was my sister's and also the mother of the bride's wedding instead of the bride's, because they tried out the bridal bouquet and all these things. So what this is, and I wanted her to have red sunglasses on, but I knew, to be honest, I had to have eyes on her and I couldn't see them. So I went someplace and found eyes for her and pasted those on. And I printed out all these things and tried to make them the same size, but the hair comes from one place. This arm is from someplace where she was sitting down. The legs are from someplace where she was walking. I pasted that all together in a collage so that it became what I thought I was going for. Okay, so now I can start going. So, I started knitting because I was tired of making projects. I just finished a hard one, so I did the easiest part first. Knit the skirt, pin it on. Then the man needs something, so start on him. Then I didn't have any shoes, but I knew all the women wore these shoes and they all took them off. And so I went to a shoe store and I said, I'm an artist and I want to have a really high pair of shoes, and I'm making this piece that's a little bit under life size. So I want the smallest, highest pair of shoes you have, and I'd like to buy them, but then I want to just go take some pictures and then bring them back and get my money back. And they said, great, we just love people who are interested in our shoes for art. So I did that, and then I took selfies of me holding the shoes. So what I do for the basic body here is I take needlepoint canvas and I mount it on canvas stretchers, and that's what I work on for the basic body. So I paint a picture of sort of what I'm going to do. Then I have to build some shape on that. So all of this part, I've used polyester stuffing and so on to make some breasts and shaping on the legs. And I put red felt over the shaping on the legs because if you could see through the black knitting, I wanted it to be red underneath. For some reason, my screen doesn't show very well, so I have to, I had to start I make everything separate. So I have a hand. It's all right for people to go out, don't feel bad. Okay. I make the arms and the shoes and the head and everything separately, so I had to start thinking about that. Got the shoes done, then I'm working on the neck, on the basic big part. Hand, another hand, 3 hands in the shoes. Now I need a head, so I made that separately on another piece. Start working on the face. Keep pinning it up on a bulletin. I have a bulletin board at the end of my kitchen, so I can look from a long ways away. I've got a lot of little pieces that I'm pinning up. Here I have some, I put a wig on the top just so I can sort of see what a hat will look like, because I know it's not that, but go on. She needs some hair so I can figure out what that hat's got to look like. This hat's too tall, work on the hair a little bit more. The hair's all tied in one at a time. Then he needed something to balance with the red. He didn't have that at all in that collage I've done before. Then he needed some buttons. Then he needed a nice collar. I feel like I'm all done. I went to a thrift shop and I found pearls with red in between. How lucky, I didn't have to make those. But I figured I'm all done, except there was one problem left that was a big problem. Let me see if I can get this the right size. Oh, you can see this is also, I found this brocade at a thrift store. Look at those glasses. All this time I've had them folded up and pinned on, and now I have to saw the glasses off and drill holes in them and so on, and figure out how can I make those glasses on, and so I can finally be done. And now I'm done. Okay.
Thank you very much. I had to draw Marie out just a little bit more. She came heavily embellished today, and I just want, you mind if I show off your skirt a little bit?
Oh, okay.
If you step forward, you'll see that yesterday she had a hand-altered jacket, crocheted and embellished, and today she has a hand-altered skirt. So I hope that you will join us again at 4:30. If you have some questions for Marie, you can ask her then. We'll have a little bit of food and drink here as well. So come on back after a short break, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.